Should you open your spotlight caches for Lady Deathstrike? She's coming to the game tonight, so depending when you're watching this video, she might be in game or not. We're going to look over whether you should open those spotlight caches for Lady Deathstrike, what sort of decks you can play with Lady Deathstrike starting day one, and just generally discuss if she's a decent card. So let's dive in. As everybody's probably aware, spotlight caches are very rare. They're very valuable. Depending on how much you're hoarding or not hoarding might determine whether you are opening these often or not at all. You can see I didn't open anything for the last week that we had with Galactus, Nimrod, and Spider-Ham. We previously put together a spotlight cache tier list. Lady Deathstrike on this one, along with MODOK and Stature, who are the other cards in this spotlight this week. They landed in the good niche section. I still stand by that, even though some of the decks I really like that we're going to look at in this video. I think she's going to create some creative opportunities in game. I think she's going to be sort of fun. But unless you've got a bunch of spotlight caches ready to go and you need those cards, I'm not sure you really want to use your coveted spotlight caches to open for a card like this. We'll see. X23 and Silver Samurai, those weeks seem to be the better weeks this month. We're jumping to the spreadsheet real quick. You can see we always like to look ahead anytime we're talking spotlight caches. This is where we're at, right? So we got Lady Deathstrike this week, along with MODOK and Stature. Next week, we've got X23 along with Nebula and Silk. The week after that, we've got Silver Samurai, Kitty Pryde, and Spider-Man 2099. The week in September, with the first week of the Loki season pass, is going to be Ghost Spider, Null, and Jeff. So we're looking at these 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, plus whatever else is coming in September, of where do you want to spend your spotlight caches. Now, you only get about 4 spotlights a month if you're not spending anything. So you've got to keep that in mind. Depending on how much you've got saved up and how much you're willing to expend is going to determine the answer to this question. If you're a cheap spender, you don't like Destroy, I would probably stay away from Lady Deathstrike, even though she's a Series 5 card. I think there are other more valuable cards that are coming to the game you might want to focus on. Again, though, if you got a bunch of spotlights, you really want to get every card, I think it's fine. Go ahead and open. It's a good week. Or if you really like Destroy and sort of coming up with creative ways to play the game, I think that is another reason to open Lady Deathstrike this week. But looking at this, I think generally speaking, you know, X23 seems to be sort of the winner this month. I think Silver Samurai is going to be a top-notch card as well. But really, it's all about September still. People are loving September, so they're really looking to save for that. So if you're not a Destroy player, you don't have a bunch of spotlights saved up, or you're not a spender, I'd be fine with waiting on Lady Deathstrike. Don't stress about it. You're going to see a bunch of decks this week. Watch them, learn them, and then whenever she comes back another time, by that time, you can decide if you want to open her. Personally, because I've got about 12 spotlights saved, I'm going to try to open. If I get to 2 and I haven't opened her yet, at that point, I'm going to sit and think. We're going to hop over to Marvel Snap Zone to look at the card and look at their deck builder. I highly recommend using this deck builder for theory crafting. Shout out to them. They do a lot of good work on that website, great articles, etc. If you're unaware, Lady Deathstrike is a 5/3 card. On reveal, she destroys each card here with less power than this. You can certainly bring up her power with Shuri, Forge, Nakia to help destroy more cards or build up her power so she's higher, so she destroys more cards. That's the name of the game with Lady Deathstrike. Are you necessarily going to want to build decks around her? There's actually the potential to do it. You could. Now, is it going to be great? I don't know. 3 is not a lot of power, even with Forge at 5. Shuri, potentially, if you get her to, you know, wong it up and you get a double and move things around, that can get kind of fun, and we'll look at a deck like that. But she has some limitations because of that low power. And then she comes later in the game. So because of that, you got to be really careful. Cosmo, obviously, is a huge counter here. So you've got to be careful for that as well. Armor, huge counter right away. Anytime you're doing Destroy, those are things you've got to look at. Now, as we're transitioning to look at the decks, remember the cards we talked about previously that we thought could be good with her. We talked Absorbing Man. We talked Shuri, Wong. We mentioned them. Null, because she's going to be destroying things. Zola, Forge, Nakia. I think I mentioned Mr. Negative before. So let's check out the decks that we're talking about here. Again, I want to shout out Marvel Snap Zone. They've got a deck builder. Go do it. It's fantastic for theory crafting. Is Lady Negative. And this leans into Mr. Negative. So you're going to have cards that you want to help get Mr. Negative earlier in Psylocke and Zabu. And I like Psylocke in this deck because if she does get negative, it's a cheap card late and it still doesn't hurt. So that's there. Bast is there because all of the cards in here, if you hit it with that 3-cost Bast, none of them get hurt. Not one card in this deck is hurt by getting hit by Bast. Zabu we mentioned to bring out earlier. You've got Mystique to copy Iron Man, to copy Wong, to copy Super Skrull, to copy Null. You've got all sorts of avenues to use her. Wong, like I mentioned, you want there to potentially use with Shuri to get an additional double up on your Lady Deathstrike. And remember, Lady Deathstrike's going to clear out whatever is there. So if you Wong, Shuri, Lady Deathstrike, you can easily Zola after that because it's just going to be Lady Deathstrike. Obviously, Mr. Negative to flip the power and energy. Super Scroll, I just like as a negative card. It gets good power to cost ratio, and with anybody who's playing ongoing, it's a good counter card. He's in here for that reason. Potential replacement if you don't like that. Iron Man is always really good in Mr. Negative decks. The card that we're highlighting, Lady Deathstrike. Zola, the idea with Zola here is that, like I said, you Wong, you Shuri, you Lady Deathstrike. It's just Lady Deathstrike at that point, and then you can Zola. And then Zola will put Lady Deathstrike on other lanes. She will be, what, 612 power? And then she clears out almost every card in those lanes. That's phenomenal. And then you've got Null to potentially lay down as well, depending when you get hits with negative. Now, you could always Lady Deathstrike and double her up with Shuri, still Null in another lane. There's a lot of different potential here depending what you get from your Mr. Negative. I like this one probably the most in theory. The other ones we're going to go into, I think, have some potential, but I think I'm a little biased towards negative decks just because they can be so huge and fun. I'm really excited to try out Lady Negative. Potential alternative cards that you could put in this deck. It's really, I mean, it's a negative deck, so anything in that regard. But when I'm actually looking at this one, the ones that I have here, you could put America Chavez for just consistency. Angela, Rogue, Ironheart, you know, anything that's going to make you feel like you're a little bit more flexible and you've got multiple win conditions. But when I looked at this one, this is the one that I definitely thought could be really, really strong. The next one we've got, we're going to call Toxic Lady. The concept here is basically to try to get your Lady Deathstrike built up a little bit more and your opponent built down a little bit. You're going to ping him a little bit. But the only real ping you've got is Hazmat. You've also got Nova. You've got a Hood that you can lay down early and get easily destroyed with Lady Deathstrike to get your Hood. But again, if you don't draw Lady Deathstrike, you've got nothing else to kill that Hood. You've got Debris to help clog lanes so that you can get more hazmated stuff out there, because you want to clog their lanes so that they can't put a lot of cards. You're guaranteeing, hey, that card is going to be less than Lady Deathstrike. They're not going to have the ability to make that less. Now, if they have a Luke Cage, well, it still doesn't matter because Lady Deathstrike is going to be higher than a Rock. So I like Debris in this. Again, Nakia to build up some points. Shuri I still have in here. I think she might be a little clunky in this list. We'll see, because if you think about it, Lady Deathstrike in this one, she's really only targeting one lane. But if you're clogging a lot of other lanes and they don't have a lot in there, it might work fine. I think this one you got to be a little careful with, but then you've got Absorbing Man as well. So you could always Lady Deathstrike and then Absorbing Man on 6. Obviously, anytime you're doing some Destroy, you're looking at Null. I think Null could be a little clunky here. As far as replacements go, I think he's one that could fall off. I think potentially Shuri is one that could fall off. I would look for maybe an America Chavez. You've got some flexibility in this one, but that's where I'd look here. One that I started playing with from that Toxic Lady is Evolved Toxic Lady. This swings in the High Evolutionary card, and you want to bring in your Negative Affliction cards. You're not seeing as many High Evolutionary cards lately, but he's still a really strong card, and there are a lot of good ways to use them. So we lean into High Evolutionary with Wasp to get one Negative Afflict. Misty Knight we have to help build up your cards so that the chance that Lady Deathstrike is going to take out one of yours, because you got to make sure that Luke Cage is like doing okay, right? Because otherwise he's gone, right? Lady Deathstrike's going to take out Luke Cage. So that's critical. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the last deck, but you need to make sure you're careful when you play Luke Cage. He's a card that you don't want to play before Lady Deathstrike unless you want those hazmat hits that you took to take effect late. Debris again, because you just want to clog the lane. You're trying to put stuff out there that they can't fill in that you know you can ping. That's why Debris is here. Cyclops, similar reason. He's a super strong card. Anytime you're not using energy, he can ping. Now, if you look at this though, you don't have a lot of opportunity to do that other than maybe turn 5. Turn 4, I guess you could. I mean, maybe you throw Debris down on turn 4. Turn 5, you're likely going to use Lady Deathstrike, or maybe you save her for turn 6 for a late kill. If you use maybe an A-bomb on turn 5 that's been lowered in cost, that Cyclops can help ping some other cards. So you're trying to ping things around again so that you can get that Lady Deathstrike out and take people's cards away. But you've got to be really careful. Again, remember, power is king. Anybody who's got the higher power in the lane is going to win. And if somebody's laying out huge power out there, you know, what's Lady Deathstrike going to do? She's not going to take anything off the board. Storm is to help lock down a lane potentially with that Cyclops. High Evolutionary, obviously you need. Lady Deathstrike, the highlighted card. Hulk for now we have in here because I thought it might be a good multiple path to victories type situation. Maybe you get him, you play him late, you didn't get exactly what you need. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to slam down a bunch of power with Hulk on this last turn. Null is a card that I think could be replaced here. I think I've sort of fallen in love with getting Null in some of these Lady Deathstrike decks. But I think in this one, and maybe even the other one, I'm not convinced that she'll destroy enough to be able to play him. I think he's probably one of the more replaceable cards in the decks that we're looking at. Jeff is an option for this one to put in if you've got him. Because if you lock down that storm lane, maybe they have the way to get in there that's a little bit better than yours, or you're not pinging, or if you got a Luke Cage, and you're like, oh man, what am I going to do? Jeff is, I think, a phenomenal option there. And additionally, Thing is a good card to put in here as well. Maybe you drop Null for Thing. Thing can help give some negative affliction out there. And I actually, now that I'm looking at this, I think I would like that one better already. Like just taking out Null, putting in Thing. We do it on the fly here, right there. We saw it, we liked it. We're like, you know what? No, we like that better. Let's take out Null. Let's put in Thing. Get some more negative affliction out there. I think it'll feel a little better. Now, the question is, at the end of the game, have you put enough power out there that Lady Deathstrike made a difference? That's really the question. Are you going to be able to do that? She's also focused in on one potential lane. So you don't have a Zola here. Maybe you take out Hulk and play with Zola and you leave that Lady Deathstrike in one spot. But again, that's when we really look at decks like this. I don't want to go crazy with the Zola Lady Deathstrike thing. I want to give you a couple opportunities to look at decks here and go, which one of these do I like the best? How do I want to play this? Because to me, this one helps clear the board the most. This one, the Lady Negative one, which I think is probably, of all the decks we're looking at right now, the best of the Lady Deathstrike decks. And maybe the reason to open a spotlight for Lady Deathstrike is this one makes me the most excited. When I look at these other ones, I could see them getting a little tough. It's like, well, what am I really doing here? Am I really clearing that much for my opponent? Does my opponent have, you know, is this a Shuri Red Skull situation that there's nothing I can do because they're going to play so late that I'm never going to destroy anything. Now, that is part of how Marvel Snap works, paper, rock, scissors, where you're going to be able to like, yeah, there's a counter to every deck. But I think it's worth playing with a little bit to see if you could sort of junk up somebody a little bit, have some fun. I mean, you could Absorbing Man with Debris too. That's another thing to think about. You Debris, you Absorbing Man, like then you Hazmat, then you Lady Deathstrike. It's like, okay, I'm cool. You know, like this is great. I love this. And the more I look at that, the more I really like that. Just the concept of really Debris into Absorbing Man and then Lady Deathstriking potentially on turn 6, maybe with the demon that you got from the hood, and you want a Lady Deathstrike onto that hood lane. I mean, that's the type of thing that you want to think about with these things. And you'd want to put Nova and the hood in that same lane so that you know you're going to destroy both of them, and that the Nova is going to go to what other card that you've got. And that's the type of thing that you got to get creative with. And again, as I'm looking at this, like, Null, what are you doing for me, Null? Are you going to do anything for me? Maybe, maybe not, because Lady Deathstrike's not going to take out a bunch of huge cards. So in this regard, do you want to take out Null? And the card we mentioned earlier that you might want to do that with was America Chavez. So I think she might be a little bit better here than maybe another card, but it's something to think about. And for the video, again, we're going to make the change. We think this will be a little bit more consistent, a little bit more better. You're not really leaning on destroying huge cards. You're just trying to get some decent plays in decent spots. You're trying to junk up your opponent to make them not be able to play a lot. And then you're going to take out a bunch of their junk with Lady Deathstrike, which is like, okay, cool. That's great. I love it. And then you're going to take out your junk with Lady Deathstrike. If you don't get Luke Cage in these, okay, that's fine. Maybe you don't want Luke Cage. You don't care to take out Luke Cage. And then you come to the Evolved Toxic Lady, same type of thing. And you know what? Maybe you can throw an Absorbing Man in here somewhere. Maybe an option besides Hulk is Absorbing Man. Maybe Hulk's not going to do it for you. You Absorbing Man your Lady Deathstrike. You Absorbing Man your Thing. You Absorbing Man your Debris. Look at that sort of play line to see if you can junk up your opponent. That way your Lady Deathstrike's going to potentially take away what's in that lane. Again, maybe you want to Zola that Lady Deathstrike as well and have her move around. That is something that I think Zola could work with her in any of these decks because she's going to clear out a potential spot for you, and then you can Zola and clear out those other spots as well. So what's your plan? Are you going to open for Lady Deathstrike? Do you think she's worth it? Are you thinking there's decks that could be way better than anything we've talked about? She seems to be, like I said, from the tier list, a sort of good niche type card. Not sure you're going to build decks around her. We certainly named the ones in this video around Lady Deathstrike because it's are you going to open a spotlight for Lady Deathstrike? Is it a Lady Deathstrike deck? That's what we're looking at in this video. So we're going to obviously highlight her and what's around her. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, or if you want to come chat on the Discord, that's linked in the description below. We're going to continue to do some videos on Lady Deathstrike this week. We'll see how she shakes out. Appreciate you making this far. Until next time, hope you have a wonderful day.